I think mine's working.
There we are, sorry. Good morning, everybody. My slight apologies for the slight delay to the meeting. The chairman couldn't get the microphone working. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the SKDC Constitution Committee. It's Monday the 8th of November, even at 10:30. But before I start, I would just like to formally welcome Councillor Ray Wotton both to this committee and also into the position of Vice Chair of this committee. Obviously, there was a vacancy caused by the sad Councillor Mike Exton. I know Councillor Ray Wotton, as a former chairman of this committee, will bring a lot of valuable experience to us as we go through the constitution review. So good morning, Ray, and a very, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to move on to the first item on the agenda. Oh, sorry, before I go, I've got to say, right, there is no fire drill expected this morning. So if the fire alarm does go, it will be an actual fire, and the fire escape doors are located at the top end of the chamber, fire exit there, and the main doors there. Secondly, please could I ask all members and officers to make sure that all mobile phones and other electronic devices are either turned off or turned to silent. Thank you very much. So now on to the formal agenda, and the first item is apologies for absence. So over to Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor David Bellamy, Councillor Susan Sandal. Councillor Fellows, I believe, will be in later. He will be slightly late. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. Next item on the agenda. Any members got any disclosure of interests? Thank you. Nobody's indicating on that. So move over to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of September 2021. I'm assuming that all members of the committee have read through the minutes. So before we adopt them, has any member got anything to add with regard to the minutes? Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anything on that one either. So can I have somebody to propose and second the minutes? Okay, thank you. I think I'm the only other committee member who was there, so I'm going to have to second. So I'll second those. So if all members in favour of those minutes, please indicate. That's 2. And any against? And any abstentions? That's fine. And I know the reasons that for those. I know that the Councillor Baxter was not at the previous meeting and sent us apologies, and Councillor Ray Wotton obviously wasn't on the committee at that point. So thank you for that. Now over to the next agenda item, updates from the previous meeting, which is agenda item 4 on page 7 of the meeting pack. I don't think there's anything to add to that. The papers that were promised in agenda item 2, in 1 and 2, are here today, and obviously we are planning to have this additional meeting in January before full council on the 27th of January to sort of formally recommend it to the responsibility for functions before it goes to full council for their consideration. So I don't think there's anything from that, unless any members of the committee. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Have you got a date for that meeting yet?
Not as yet. I'm kind of thinking to myself, in order to give officers time to prepare a paper, and obviously meeting papers for full council have to go out 7 working days before. I'm kind of thinking in my own mind we'd have to have something between the 10th and the 15th. Just wonder if I can pass it over to either Alan or Graham for their views on potentially when we could hold our meeting. Thank you.
Chairman, I think it's something that we need to consider diaries for, make sure to use when we can get the best availability. But you're right, we need to give those clear days between meetings and to give us opportunities to make any changes to reports in between. But if I could come back to you with some proposals to make sure, you know, the key people, as many people as possible, are available as well. But we can work that through. So I'm sorry we don't have a date at the moment, but we'll get you one kind of by you know, either close of play today or tomorrow. We'll get something through for you.
Okay, thanks very much, Alan. But as I say, it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be at least, I'm thinking, 10 days at the minimum before next full council. Because I'm just thinking, obviously, any report that comes out from that will have to be written by officers, and then obviously then go out as part of the council papers the week before. So yeah, thanks very much on that one. Thank you. Just before we move on to the next agenda item, I'm just going to allow Councillor Fellows some time to get himself seated.
Apologies, Chair.
That's okay. That's okay, Paul. Thank you.
May I ask another question? It's not on the update. I don't know if it's under any other business, but we've recently had a scrutiny review. We've had the initial findings sent back to us. Can you tell us what the flight path is likely to be for that to, if anything needs to happen to the Constitution as a result of the scrutiny review, how and when is that likely to happen?
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Baxter. That was the conversation that I was having with Alan Robinson just before this meeting. I was going to raise it under any other business, but it's all right. We may as well discuss it now since you raised it. I think for further discussion, I was going to ask that a paper come back to this committee at some point. I was just speaking with Alan to clarify when exactly that would be. So I'll pass over to Alan. He can, and Alan hopefully can update you with our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So yeah, further to that, and to bring everyone else involved in that discussion. Obviously, we've got meetings this week on Thursday, and I hope as many people as possible attend that. Where's the opportunity to receive the report and to question the authors of it. So that will be really helpful, I think, for members. We'll try and get a paper back to this committee. Obviously, that's the process. If we are going to make constitutional changes, they need to be approved, recommended by this committee for agreement at full council. So there'll be a two-stage process. I think in reality, it's likely to be early in the new year. So I would have said we'll aim for the Constitution Committee. I'll need to check with Graham, but kind of January time, I would have thought would be a reasonable timeline to get something to this committee, with it then going on to full council in due course.
Thanks, Alan. And I think that also part of our conversation was we kind of understand that the timetable for the screening review will be kind of similar to that of the planning review. It'll be sort of outside the main, outside the main timetable, because rather than try and rush something through, because obviously this first stage we were on around schedule for responsibilities. We're looking to kind of get finalised by January with this screening review on Councillor Baxter. I'm prepared to, I'll let it go as long as it needs to be. And if we need an extra meeting to discuss it, we will schedule one in. Thank you. Okay, right, now moving on to agenda item 5, which is the members' code of conduct. Just going to pass over initially to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Linda Wootton, on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to bring this to you this morning, and I'm just going to skip through a few points. The background to the report is the Local Government Association introduced a new model councillor code of conduct on 23rd of December 2020, which had been designed to protect a councillor's democratic role, encourage good conduct and safeguard the public's interest in local government. A copy of the model code of conduct is attached to this report at Appendix A. The new code has been developed in association with key partners and extensive consultation with the local government sector. A number of authorities across the country have adopted the new model code. However, this can be used as a template for individual councils to adopt in whole or with local amendments. South Kesteven District Council's current code of conduct is based on the previous model code. You will see this at 1.5. At 1.7, the new model code also sets out greater transparency regarding the registration and disclosure of interests, with a requirement to register other interests in addition to disclosable pecuniary interests, which include, and it's listed here, and I take it you've read your papers. And on that point, I will now hand over to Graham, our officer, who's going to take you through this paper. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Linda. Over to Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, the model code of conduct that is recommended by the Local Government Association is attached to Appendix 1. It focuses on the same 7 principles of public life, known as the Nolan principles, that underpin the code of conduct that we have in place now. And it sets out on that first page the principles that members should act in accordance with in undertaking public roles. It goes into a little bit more detail and strength in terms of some of the areas that underpin this new model code. So the first one is on page 14, which is respect. And there are examples there of how a member should act in relation to treating one another with respect. There's also a section on bullying, harassment and discrimination. More clarity in relation to impartiality of officers of the council, confidentiality and access to information, disrepute, use of position. So it goes into a lot more strength and detail in relation to what is expected of councillors in their role as elected members. But the model code has been in quite a bit of development through the LGA. LGA has been in consultation with local authorities, I think, over about a 12-month period. So it's gone through quite a rigorous process, and a lot of authorities are starting to adopt the code now if they haven't done already. Having been in post for nearly 6 months, and with the monitoring officer as well, relatively new in post, it's our kind of consideration that this is a model, this is a code that we should be adopting alongside other authorities. So that is the recommendation for the committee today, to make a recommendation to council. I actually met the independent person this morning, and he is also supportive of the model code that's before you. In addition to that aspect of the code, there is another element in relation to the registration of interests. So alongside disclosable pecuniary interests that are required to be registered, there are other interests in here that the model code requires are registered as well, such as unpaid directorships, anybody of which you're a member or in a position of general control or management, and anybody exercising functions of a public nature directed to charitable purposes, or one whose principal purposes includes the influence of public opinion or policy, such as political parties. So that's just key highlights really in relation to the model code, but that is what's recommended to you today for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Graham. Before I open this up to questions, I've just got one introductory question. Do we know how many local authorities so far have adopted this new model? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That's something that I have been trying to research. It's quite difficult to find. I think the difficulty is that the model code is there as a bit of a template, and it doesn't prevent authorities taking bits out of it or adding bits to it. So it's difficult to kind of know how many authorities have adopted the model code as it stands in terms of that which is recommended by the LGA. What I'll do before council, if the committee is minded to recommend this to council, is try and find out how many authorities in Lincolnshire have adopted the model code as it stands. I had tried to get confirmation from the county council, but I haven't had a response yet. But I will do that in terms of all the other councils in Lincolnshire.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Gray. Right, open this. Before we start, Alan Robinson, something to say. Thank you.
Chairman, just to try and give you some more local information around that. So I was able to attend the monitoring officer meeting for the Lincolnshire councils the week before last. I'm aware that the county council have a scheme that is very similar to this. It's not quite the same, but it's written by the same authors. So it is very similar. So it isn't. They're not planning to adopt this exact scheme because they feel that their existing one is more or less the same. Both West Lindsey and North Kesteven are in the process of considering implementing the new scheme. West Lindsey are probably a little bit closer than North Kesteven are to in terms of going through their processes. I think so. I think it is becoming the kind of the way to do this. Certainly locally, there was a lot of conversation about this being an opportunity to not only implement a standard scheme, but also to kind of just reignite the discussions about member behaviour and the code of conduct throughout local government.
Thanks very much to leave that out. Questions? I think Councillor Baxter got there first, so that's you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one short question and then a longer comment. The short question is, if a member of the council breaks the code of conduct, what is the consequence?
Okay, I'll have to pass it over to Alan, I'm guessing that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So the break, as you're aware, Councillor Baxter, we're still as monitoring officers frustrated to a degree that the sanctions are limited. There is no ability, as you know, to suspend or remove a councillor as part of the code of conduct, and hasn't been the case, hasn't been since 2012. Constantly lobbying as a group of monitoring officers to get that amended, but it isn't. So you're then talking about removal of the use of council facilities, councils voting to remove people from committees, and potentially public censure on the website. So almost the fact you breached the code of conduct being published on your website and that comes down to Eric Pickles' desire to make members accountable to the ballot box rather than to these processes. So that's where we are at the moment. Yeah, so the sanctions are limited. But of course they are still there, and particularly that public censure is probably the most significant one. And but everything else requires a recommendation to full council to be agreed.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I know you want to make a comment, Councillor Baxter. Right, okay. Councillor Ray-Wilson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Baxter's already raised the question on sanctions for me, but going through this report, which I really welcome, are we expected, if approved, to sign and be abided by this code of conduct from the day we become a councillor? And are we abided by this report in all our life when we're not on duty, even though we're still a councillor?
Well, first of all, of course, yeah, once this has been adopted by the council, we'll go through a process of getting, or even all our existing members, to sign up to the new code of conduct, which is the council's code of conduct, of course. And that might mean adding some additional declarations of interest, depending on your circumstances. So we'll work our way through that. It does what it does in terms of, there is still an issue that you only abide by the code of conduct in your council when you're being a council or purporting to be so. And the change with this one compared to the previous code of conduct is it gives a lot more clarity about the use of social media. So it makes it clearer when you're purporting to be. So just because you're not saying I am Councillor Wotton, if you're making a political point or you're speaking about something that you only know because you're a councillor, you might be seen by the public to be being a councillor at that time, and therefore that would mean the code was engaged. And we're just trying to get that clarity into this code that because obviously, you know, behaviour outside of your public life, whilst it has a big impact on the reputation of you and the council, hasn't in the past always been brought to task by the code of conduct. And it's hoped certainly that social media stuff that where you are behaving as a councillor, it'll be much clearer that you are.
Chairman, that was the question I was going to come to, social media, because we've had quite a lot of our members have complained about being attacked on social media. And I'm hoping by the adoption of this code, if we do adopt it, that will put a stop to that and make us more professional, more polite and respect each other. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you indeed for that. I just before I go to Councillor Baxter, I think the potentially, I appreciate, Alan, this is a bit of a grey, and there's going to be that sort of grey line between, you know, when you're acting as a councillor, when you're acting as a member of the public. And I'm kind of minded to something that I read a long time ago about in our role as councillors, we're supposed to be sort of leaders of our local communities. I think even when we are sometimes perhaps, you know, acting in our private lives, do have to realise that the people potentially will still know that we are councillors, you know, and yes, we have a right to a private life as well. But I think if you are in public office and you're on the public view, you probably do have to sort of, you know, be very mindful at all times that you are still a councillor. But I appreciate the grey area that is there. So thanks for those comments. Pass over now to Councillor Baxter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, could somebody point me to the bit in this that talks about social media? I can only see one reference to it at the end of paragraph 1.1.
Over to Alan Graham. Can you shed some light on this?
Thanks, Chairman. It's listed on page 14. So it says the code applies to all forms of communication and interaction, including, there's a list of bullet points, and it says in electronic and social media communication, posts, statements and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Watson, Chair. Are we saying then that the previous code didn't cover social media? Because I certainly have had a lot of correspondence about social media under the previous code. So what's the difference?
I need to pass that over to either Graham or Alan for the technical detail.
I think the difference with this code is the bullet points above that section. It says this code of conduct applies to you when you're acting in your capacity as a councillor, which may include when you misuse your position as a councillor or your actions would give the impression to a reasonable member of the public with knowledge of all the facts that you are acting as a councillor. So at the moment, if you're on social media and it's clear that you're a councillor and you're making comments as a councillor and it breaches the code, the current code of conduct would be enforced because it's clear that you're acting as a councillor. This is going a step further in relation to what Mr. Robertson said in the example that if you're not, it's not necessarily that you are. So, for example, if you're using a councillor Facebook profile and you said something that would breach the code, this is going a step further by saying that actually, if you're using your personal social media account and you're talking about something in relation to something you would know only as a councillor and you're breaching the code can still apply even if it's not on your councillor account. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Thanks, Graham. I think it is this grey area, isn't it? That, and maybe just wondering if we do need a little bit more, because it is quite subjective, isn't it? Really, you know, and I think with a lot of this stuff that has got a legal or a legality background can be open to interpretation. I'm just wondering if officers can maybe just do a little bit more. Graham?
Chair, we have, subject to council approving the model code, we have training set up on the 29th of November for all members. This is something in particular that we will focus on to provide clarity, scenarios, and we'll certainly do a bit more research to ensure that the members are clear as to what the rules are in relation to the model code in relation to social media in particular.
Is that okay, Councillor Baxter? Do you want to come back?
Yeah, that answers that question. Thank you very much. So a more general comment about this model code of conduct and the previous model code of conduct is that it's useless. It's toothless. We can't do anything to get rid of councillors. We're in an era of national sleaze that currently is mostly within the Conservative Party. We've got nationally contracts are being given to friends and family of Conservative councillors and Conservative friends. We've got other national scandals with decorating and the COVID contracts and all this. And so nationally, politics is kind of in the spotlight again as being a place where sleaze and corruption and nepotism thrives. On a local level, we've got some problems of our own. Despite the code of conduct, councillors are allowed to lie in public meetings. They're allowed to lie on election leaflets, and people have spotted that, and it undermines the people. It undermines us as councillors when that is allowed to go unchallenged. And the current code of conduct does allow that to go unchallenged. Some of these things I'm talking about are not even investigated. Meanwhile, there are other vindictive complaints put in about councillors, which are investigated, and there is also a culture of deliberately misinterpreting what is legitimate criticism of people acting in the role as councillors and pretending that that's personal attack. If somebody is doing something wrong and you call it out, that's not a personal attack. That is legitimate criticism of the way people are doing their job. And at the moment, that all often gets swept under the carpet, and the person who is calling out the malpractice is the person who gets the complaint against them. It is not good enough, and I don't think this makes it much better, really, because this is just more words saying the same thing, that at the end of the day, we should all be respectful to each other, and we should all obey the code of conduct. So I have no confidence in the current code of conduct. I don't see how this is going to make any difference. Meanwhile, we had the comments made by a chair of a committee who has been suspended from the Conservative Party now for making a racist comment. That investigation goes on, but he is still the chair of a committee. He is still receiving his special responsibility allowance, and frankly, I don't know how that changes. I don't know whether we're going to get a report to the forthcoming council meeting about it, changing the way. So anyway, the reason why I'm abstaining on this report is because I have no confidence in the process whatsoever. It's useless, it's toothless, and a waste of time.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Your comments have been noted for the minutes. Pass over to, I think Alan Robinson wants to come back and on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I recognise the issue around sanctions. We all do. So that I don't want to talk about individual cases, and I think it's really inappropriate for anyone to discuss live cases. So I think as a committee, if we can just not discuss any cases that are currently being investigated, it's not our role as a Constitution Committee. And obviously, I don't intend to kind of run through what we're doing, what we're not doing in this meeting. That'll be dealt with through proper process, and we'll make sure that's done properly, and we'll feed back to the whole council. Okay, so I can't go into any more detail. I'd really like not to have a debate on that. If we can help that, please, Chairman.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. I did allow Councillor Baxter to sort of finish his statement because it's his view, and he's perfectly entitled to express it. But I would tend to share your view, Alan, that we can't really discuss individual issues that are currently going on, especially when they are still being investigated, and those sort of investigations haven't sort of finished their due process, because I think it's really important that we do try to maintain some kind of due process in all of this. So I won't say any more on that. Thank you. I've now got Councillor Paul Fellows. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I actually didn't think I could add anything to this discussion, although as probably a lot of you will suspect, I have a lot of empathy with a lot of the points that Councillor Baxter was raising. I am minded of the fact of we are the Constitution Committee, and what we're doing is to try and put forward our set of rules, our Constitution. So in that, I'm finding myself not unable to recommend or fulfill the recommendations of the committee that this constitution, because okay, it may be a set of rules that's not working, but it's potentially a set of rules that we have to have, and it's a structure we have to have. If I could indulge a little bit, and again, if you'll tell me if I'm out of order on this, Chair, but I've had a complaint against me for a comment I made on social media, and the complaint was very, very detailed and very, very specific. And I looked into it and I thought about it. And basically, I was making comments on, judging what we've done now, could my comments have been judged as comments from a councillor? Yes. What got me was that something Ashley said was the comments where I still feel and would say that I was indulging in a legitimate discussion and I was putting forward a view. But because under this, the new constitution, I'm actually looking at it saying, I can never go on social media and make a comment again, ever. I could have my own page. I could write about family matters. I could put 101 moans about Aston Villa because I love them and they're going nowhere. And that could not be construed as anything other than a personal. But as soon as I go on any forum, electronic, and make a comment on information I know I have to either inform or to question or to challenge, there is a possibility that that challenge and that questioning is then set up as I'm breaking a code of conduct. I couldn't see it as that. So for me, I think there is a need to really deeply explore the notion of social media, so at least we all know where we're at. But to be brief and to sum up, I will support this motion because I think we have to have this set of rules, and that as our Constitution Committee, that is our job. I have no doubt whatsoever that a lot of other councillors will have things to say and need to be listened to, their views. So that's where I am with it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much for that, Paul. I just would sort of address members to the top of page 15, where it talks about, and the first paragraph says, debates and having different views are all part of a healthy democracy. As a councillor, you can express, challenge, criticise and disagree with views, ideas, opinions and policies in a robust but civil manner. And to share your point about grey areas, I think, if we're having discussions, I mean, potentially something the way that we as councillors may think is a robust discussion about policy or issues might, to a person who's not a councillor, come over as being potentially aggressive or over-assertive. And I'm just, maybe as part of the training, Graham, if this does go through, then we need to maybe sort of look at that and perhaps do some scenarios, because I think it's okay to say I disagree with you because of this, and this. It's probably not I did to say you're a complete idiot to somebody and whatever. I think it's just a question of potentially some of the language you use around that, and maybe training as part of the training sessions, if this is recommended today and then it is recommended by full council then in November, as part of the training, perhaps we could do some scenarios, case studies around that to kind of give members some clarity. But I am suspecting that potentially there may be instances when some members may legitimately think, well, what they've said is a legitimate political comment that actually a member of the public might think is a personal attack. And I think this is always going to be a grey area around this. And it may be interesting to get the view of what the independent person might think about this as well. Any comments from either Alan or Graham before I pass over to Councillor Raywalton?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's something that we'll definitely incorporate as part of the training. I think the independent person will also be in attendance at all three of those sessions as well. But yes, some scenarios to make it clear would be helpful, I think, as part of the training. So we'll certainly do that. And just in relation to the code itself, obviously we're obliged to have a code of conduct. I guess the question for council, well, for the committee and council ultimately will be, does the current code meet the standards that we think we should have in place, or does this new model code kind of add value to the code that we already have in place? So I guess that's the question for members, really.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Graham. Hand over to Councillor Ray Watson, who's got another
Yeah,
question.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Paul Fellows in relation to social media. I just want some clarification. I use social media, but Linda doesn't. When I use social media, I'd like some clarification on, do I need to now take off the wording, these are my own views, or then place on there, I am a councillor? I'd like some clarification on that, please.
Alan or Graham?
I think it's more about what you're saying. So it more than having like you can't break the code of conduct and say, but it's okay because these are my views. And I think what we'd be talking about, and I think what's come out today from Councillor Fellows and others, is it's about, and my way of putting this, it's about playing the ball, not the man, isn't it? So we can disagree with each other. We can disagree with the views of other people. That's all legitimate, and that's the cut and thrust of being in politics, isn't it? Of course. And there's a difference between I disagree with you and saying you are wrong because you are foolish or you're an idiot. There's a big difference, and you need to be aware that when you're going to step over that line into personalising this into that individual. Of course, in politics it is an individual thing. Some of it is there will be some disagreeing with other individuals. But it's just trying to really keep it. So really, we're playing the policies. It's the policies we're challenging rather than the individuals who were in the administration or even in the officer corps responsible for the introduction of the said policies.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks to Alan. Thanks. I've got Councillor Breeder Griffin now. Thank you.
Bless you. Wrong bit. I just think we've got to be so careful. Yes, what we're saying, what we're doing, etc. But if we're not careful, we'll have no debate whatsoever, because people will be frightened to say something because they're thinking that they're going to be picked up for saying something that they didn't mean that way. And it was that. I think we've got to keep a very careful balance. Otherwise, what's the point of us being here?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Griffin. I think you do raise a legitimate point there. I'm going to pass to see if Alan's or Graham's got something to say there, because I'm thinking this is another issue we can maybe look at as part of the training.
So in my view, there's always that and almost a different bar depending on who you respect it. So as members on members, where you're in this forum to have debate and to discussion and to make and in a political environment is perhaps not the same level bar as if you were talking to a junior officer or you were talking to a member of the public, and kind of that level of the level of expectation of the kind of discussions you may have with another councillor are very different to the kind you would have with a member of the public or an officer, because you can have political discussions, you can have political debates, and we have to understand the cut and thrust of politics. That's part of the idea of the code of conduct, is that we have some subtlety to take into account the fact that politics is what it is, and give the opportunity for people to put their views forward, whether we all agree with them or we don't all agree with them. So it's something that we need to look at, whether we could write that down in a sensible way that would give you all clarity. I think we probably in the training as a group need to agree what we think, and where those lines are. Of course, that makes it difficult when we're trying to deal with the process. So I think whatever we can think about how to be civil to each other and to show respect, I think we should do so.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking with training on this, it almost needs to be something that we may need to sort of. I think it's difficult. You start to get into all kinds of issues about what training for councillors you can make mandatory or not, because I know there is some training that by law you have to do if you want to sit on a certain committee, but other training is recommended. I mean, I would say that this sort of training should be highly recommended that all councillors do. And maybe it shouldn't just be a thing that happens once and then is parked, but perhaps something that we need to maybe look at on a sort of perhaps an annual basis, and perhaps annually do a refresher course in the code of conduct, members training, and certainly potentially make it a core part of the training that all new councillors receive, whether or not they come in through the main electoral cycle or through a by-election during a council term. Thanks.
No, I completely agree with you there, Chairman. So I think, yes, of course, it's got to be part of induction. It's new for some councillors, whether you're new or you're not new, it's a refresh as part of induction. And I think it will always be there, but we can't just rest on that and expect everyone to remember that, because a lot of training takes place in the induction process. So it does need to be more than that. But of course, you've got to balance that against, by the time you get to year 3 or 4, if you've not worked out what it means by then, you know, you kind of, because you're coming towards the end of your term, it's kind of, you're probably not going to. So it is kind of, you have to kind of layer, the bulk of the training will be front loaded into the beginning of an electoral term, with that kind of slowly coming down, unless something particular happens that we need to deal with, Chairman. But yeah, I think it's a great idea to get it into induction and to be regularly doing refreshers. I think it's an excellent idea. And we'll certainly be, we'll take that forward, starting with the training at the end of this month.
Thank you. I've got a question. I'm going to sort of fried Alan or grain on this, because obviously, I mean, I think that this new model code of conduct is an upgrade on the previous one, but I still think, and I think the discussion this morning has highlighted that there's still a lot of grey areas in there, even if this one isn't improved on the previous one. Is this going to be an iterative process with the LGA? Are councils going to feed back their own local experiences? Because I'm guessing that in time, in a few years' time, maybe the LGA will come up with a new code of conduct that's probably a bit more advanced and a bit tighter still. Because I'm kind of thinking that the discussion we're having here could be mirrored across loads of other councils across the country, and I'm guessing there's potential to learn from experience, pass back through the LGA, so when they come out with their next one, it might start to tighten up, or perhaps explore in a bit more detail some of these issues. Thanks.
I suppose, I mean, there isn't anything formally in place at the moment, but I'm thinking that what we should do is we should implement that ourselves. And certainly what I've done in the past is when I first introduced the code of conduct back in 2012, I reviewed the type and frequency of complaints we got and whether the code was clear on those, and whether because as monitoring officer, if there's not clarity, that leaves you in a difficult situation as to how to deal with it. So we're constantly, like we can annually look at the type and frequency of, at this committee, we can look at the type and frequency of complaints and decide whether the code was fit for purpose for dealing with the kind of complaints that we actually received. And we can amend it. Remember, we talked about this not being, we don't have to adopt on a long-term basis this exact code. So once we bed it in, we'll find out where the cracks are. That will be my view, and then we can work together to make amendments to this code as we go forward. Of course, I'll feed that in through the monitoring officer networks for our regular, updates with the, we regularly meet with the people who've written this report, who wrote this thing. They're actually a consultancy firm that really are leaders in this formally from the standards board. So they are people who've been in this for a long time. And that they're constantly asking for feedback as to how it's working. So we'll make sure we feed back into that as well.
Thank you, Fowler, because certainly one of my sort of thoughts around the whole constitution review process, and this is part of it, would be that we would, as this committee would on an annual basis, certainly review the constitution to look in to see how it's working locally. And maybe as part of the annual work, we also look at the code of conduct to see how we think it's working locally, and potentially if we do think there are areas that need to be tightened up, we can then, or things that we don't think is working and we want to change, we can then do that as part of that review process. And I'm kind of thinking that might hopefully help to work through and hopefully inform us and from experience of those areas that we may want to strengthen. I think Councillor Fellows.
I agree, Chair.
I personally am more than happy to support a code of conduct, and I'm more than happy to vote for this code of conduct, because we have to have a code of conduct, even if it is only a reference point to the people we serve, that when they don't like what we're doing or they want to question our decisions, they can say, what is your code of conduct? And I completely agree with you, Chair, and I think what my colleagues were saying as well is the need to review and make it actually as appropriate and as usable as we possibly can. Something that's a little bit off beam is I have no problem with the breaking of a code of conduct in as much as it challenges us. And if there is a process going forwards where a councillor feels so strongly about something that they do step over a particular line, well, even though they may be breaking the code of conduct, what they will also be doing is bringing something to the fore and something to be talked about. And again, I'm sorry to bring on my little stories, but as an ex-teacher, I have seen rules made and potentially broken of my whole career. We set up rules for children and I've watched them break them with amazing imagination. We have uniform codes that I've seen every single kid interpret, twist around and alter so that they feel comfortable. And in a way, I've liked that. On the other hand, I've seen teachers who've been able to use those rules as a constant nagging, as a constant, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And the process itself need not necessarily be a negative one. So to come back to where I started, I totally and utterly support a code of conduct. I could totally support this one, but I do understand there's some tweaks perhaps needed.
Thanks for that, fellas. I'm just going to go around for any last comments or questions before I put this to this recommendation to the vote of the committee. Anybody else? Okay, right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for that debate. I think we examined some quite important issues, and I think we've sort of got some sort of questions that hopefully the training can bring out. So we've just got a very, very simple recommendation, and the recommendation is that this council be recommended, that council, and I mean by that full council, be recommended to adopt the Local Government Association Model Councillor Code of Conduct as appended to the report. Have I got a proposer for that motion? I've got Councillor Raybleton proposing. Have I got a seconder for that motion? And I'm seconded by Councillor Breeder Griffin. So all members of the committee in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Thank you very much indeed. Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed for that debate, members of the committee. I thought that was extremely useful to explore that. Over now to, sorry.
Chairman, may I come in there?
Yes.
As Councillor Baxter's abstained, when this goes to full council, if members do abstain, then they obviously may not wish to sign the code of conduct. What will happen to those members if they didn't support the code of conduct?
I don't know the answer to that question. I wonder if Alan or Graham as officers have got any indication, any help on that one? Thank you.
I know that usually upon election, when you sign your acceptance of office, declaration of acceptance of office form, that has a paragraph within it that effectively says you're signing up to the code of conduct for the authority. Implementing a new code of conduct in the middle of an election cycle. I'm not sure how we would facilitate that, but I will take advice on that outside of this meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richie. Thank you. Right, over now to agenda item 6, which is the review of an update report on the Constitution review, and start with the initial introduction by Councillor Linda Wotton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. At your meeting at 30th of September 2021, the Council agreed to undertake a review of the Constitution based upon the new format consisting of the following parts, which was summary and explanation, articles of the Constitution, responsibility for functions, rules of procedure, codes and protocols, members' allowance scheme, and the management structure. So the council agreed that the constitution would be reviewed in sections, commencing with part 3, which is responsibility for functions, which sets out the council's scheme of delegation. Our officer Graham has done an awful lot of work looking at this, and I'd like to thank him for that piece of work. And now I'd like to hand over to Graham to go through the responsibility of functions and explain his colour coding, etc. And I quite like the fact it's green for go and red for gone. And he's also got blues and yellows in there. And as my maiden name's Rainbow, I'm all for colours, Graham, and it's over to you to explain all. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Linda. Yes, over to Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Will that be? So I've been working on basically the scheme of delegation, which is the new part 3 responsibility for function section of the Constitution. And this effectively is split into the 3 parts that you see on the screen. So council functions, executive functions, and delegated power to officers. And so what I've done is effectively taken the parts out of the existing Constitution and put them into one place, because at the moment they are kind of dotted all around the existing Constitution. This document sets out the whole scheme in its entirety in one document. And if you bear with me, I will dot between different documents. So this is an example. If I can get to the right page. This is one of the reasons why I haven't shared anything in the pack with you today, because it's still very much a work in progress. And I wanted the opportunity to present to you how I've kind of mapped out where the changes are, so that it's absolutely clear as a committee. You can see where things have been lifted and put into the new scheme of delegation, and where things have come out. So this document here is the existing Constitution. Anything in green has effectively been lifted and put into the new scheme of delegation. Anything in red has been removed. And if you can bear with me, this document here is an example of, so let me go back, sorry. At the top of the table there, it will tell you what page of the Constitution I've referred to. If it's green, then it will mirror the green highlighted sections on the actual working copy of the Constitution. And where it's red, again, that will mirror the Constitution, but it will give it a commentary as to why that particular part of the Constitution has been deleted. So you can kind of look at the original document, look at the mapping table, and that should give you clarity as to those bits that have literally been lifted over and those bits which have been removed. In addition to that, there's obviously, as part of a review, there's always going to be sections that need to be added in or amended. So if I can just scroll down to a section to show you. For example, oops. So anything in blue, sorry, first of all, anything that's not highlighted at all are those green sections that have been lifted from the Constitution. So anything that's not highlighted already exists as a delegated power within our existing Constitution. Anything that is blue is an amendment to something that exists in our current Constitution. And the reason for that amendment is set out in a separate table, which I'll show you shortly. Anything that's highlighted in yellow is something that is recommended for an addition into that particular scheme of delegation. And again, there's a separate table which sets out all of those additions too. So you've effectively got 3 documents. You've got the original Constitution that is highlighted to show those bits that have been lifted and those bits that have been removed. You've got the mapping document, which sets out any change at all to the Constitution and makes it clear as to why that change has occurred. And then you've got the actual part 3 document, which is this one that's on the screen now, which sets out what the new part 3 responsibility for functions will look like, and it has those highlighted parts in it so that it's absolutely clear that you as members can see what's been added, what's been amended, and just provides transparency, but in a way that hopefully isn't confusing. Like with track changes in the past, I think it's been really hard to follow when you're making such substantial changes to the constitution. And the problem with our current constitution is that all of these particular powers are dotted all over the document. It's really hard to follow. So hopefully this mapping document makes it really clear. So if I go back to the mapping table, so as you can see, there's quite a lot of additions. So these recommended additions here, all of these in this table are highlighted in yellow. So there's quite a lot of changes there that are being recommended for addition. What I would say is that I've been meeting with the council's directors and assistant directors to go through the various elements of the constitution in relation to their service areas, to just make sure that it's currently fit for purpose. The existing constitution is set out in such a way that it's, especially in relation to officer powers, it's listed under individual job descriptions or job titles, so assistant director level. A lot of those assistant director posts that no longer exist. So what I've actually done is separate the powers into service areas as opposed to job titles. So there's actually an index in the constitution document now. If I show you it. So it sets out as an index each service area. So that's that table there. So it's very clear then where an individual power lies. So if you've got something in relation to building control, you can scroll down to point 4. Quicker than this, hopefully. And there you can see, so we've changed the delegation there has changed from the existing officer that's in the constitution at the moment, which the job title no longer exists for, to a new delegation as set out in the blue highlighted bit. And that's the case throughout the whole document. So again, it's clear with that index structure, which service area, it's easy to find the service area that you're trying to seek the delegation for, and it's clear who has got authority to take decisions in relation to that particular service area. What I would say is we met with the leader of the council last week, the chairman and the cabinet member. He was very supportive of what I've done to date. I've got meetings this week, hopefully being set up with the other political group leaders, and then we will commence the schedule of meeting with other groups of members, such as chairs of scrutiny, opposition members. If any member of this committee would like to meet with me on a one-to-one to go through this in more detail, I'm very conscious this is all new and it's not been shared. It's still very much a working document, and I thought it'd be easy to just demonstrate the mapping of the document and where we are to date, rather than going into the detail, because I think it's too early at this stage to go into that detail. But I'm more than happy to facilitate a meeting with any member of this committee on a one-to-one basis if you'd like to go through what I've done to date. And in due course, we will of course bring this before members at a workshop or at a formal committee, and I'll ensure that all members have full copies of all the paperwork in advance. But it's quite a lot of paperwork, and it's can be quite complicated, and I hope I've demonstrated it clearly enough today, Chairman, for members to consider.
Thanks very much for that. Great. I think at this sort of meeting we're probably not going to be examining individual items in detail, because I'm very much aware that the members of the committee haven't got these papers in front of them. So really, I guess it's going to be questions around the process that Graham and the officers are currently undertaking, and whether members of the committee are views or comments they've got on the actual process, as opposed at this stage to specific issues. Because I'm guessing we're going to pick up specific issues later on when all of the mapping work has been done. Yeah, I'm getting a nod from Graham. So I'm going to pass this over now. And before we do, Graham, I want to express my thanks as well to you for all this hard work you're doing. Certainly, I certainly finding the colour coding mapping is really quite crucial, because using the old constitution, the mapping document, and then the new constitution, hopefully members should be able to follow the whole process of thought through. But and I think the index is really useful as well. And I know we've also explored potentially, when we do a final document, if we are, say, for instance, relying upon acts of parliament or whatever, we'll provide a hyperlink from the document to that piece of legislation. So any member who wants to know where that, if it's an external piece of legislation, can follow it through. And I think we're also looking at doing a glossary of terms as well as part of this. So those are my initial comments. And now over to the committee. Thank you. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and it certainly looks like progress, and it's. I look forward to seeing the actual documents when they're available. I'm a little bit confused about the timings of the whole thing. We said earlier in the meeting that we're presenting something to a meeting in January to go to council on the 27th of January. Can you clarify what that is? And then this is a refresh of mostly what's already in the constitution. So this is the tidying up exercise, isn't it? Yeah. And if so, what is the time scale for that? When do we expect to present a tidied up constitution to full council? And thirdly, things like the Kratos review and the scrutiny review, we're not going to tangle up the process with those two items, are we? There'll be something that goes later on, won't they?
Yes, I can answer those questions, Councillor Baxter. The paper, the recommendation that we take to full council at the end of January is in effect going to be this scheme of delegation. So, which is why we're putting this extra meeting in early in January, because hopefully by then Brian will have finished this process, and everybody, and then the consultation around this with all members, with officers, will have been completed. So in effect, at that stage, it will be the proposed scheme of delegation that goes forward to full council. So by then, we should have a new working document. I think potentially, once that's in place, there are going to be issues around certain parts of it that maybe different groups may have different political views on. So that's really what will be looked at between sort of January and has taken the final recommended report to full council in May, because I'm very much aware that once we've got initial draft documents in place, potentially some groups may have some issues around certain parts of it, and I think they need to be explored. But we can't. I don't want to confuse those with this process initially, if that makes sense. But there will be time for consultation with members and different groups. So if they have got particular issues around certain parts of the constitution, they will be able to actually raise them, and there will be a review process as part of that. I hope that answers the question on that.
What I think you've told me is that we'll be presenting chapter 3, a new chapter 3, which is called responsibility of functions. We'll hopefully have a chapter 3 at full council in January. We'll have a tidied up constitution, hopefully subject to everything else, in May. And then once we've got that, we'll start looking at the other bits, because I think what worries me is when you talk about the particular concerns that groups might have, if it's only a tidying up exercise, then we shouldn't be getting very agitated about it. We shouldn't be getting agitated about content which is already in there that's just being tidied up. And that's my fear, is that suddenly it will become complicated because somebody spots a comma that they object to or whatever.
Yeah, I think I share that. Graham, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of going through the amount of meetings that we're proposing to put in place before we take it to council is to iron out those particular issues so that we're not in a position where we take it to council and we are arguing over commas or anything else. So yeah, the whole principle is that we have a new constitution to adopt at the AGM in May. This being probably the most complicated part with the scheme of delegation. The other parts, once this is approved at council, we'll focus on those with a final version of the constitution in May. The scrutiny review and the planning review are being dealt with as separate issues, although obviously they have constitutional consequences as part of them. They can be fed into the new constitution at any stage, depending on when those particular elements are agreed at council. So the constitution will always be reviewed. I think it's in a position at the moment where it unfortunately hasn't been reviewed for some time, or any review hasn't incurred the amendments that it probably needed to keep it up to date. We're committed as monitoring officer and deputy monitoring officer to make sure that we keep it up to date so that it's always fresh and there's always an opportunity for this committee to have an input and update it if it needs updating.
Thanks, Graham. I think I'd like to just before I bring Alan in, just reiterate the point that from my perspective, I know that the planning review and now the scrutiny review are going to be, areas the members have got some really, I think they've got some really strong views and opinions on. And I did watch. I wasn't actually at the informal planning meeting that discussed the original planning review document, but I did watch it on YouTube subsequently. And it did come across to me as if members did raise some very, very legitimate concerns there. And officers went away and were going to prepare a paper. It's unfortunate, of course, the follow-up meeting had to be put back because the officers hadn't quite finished their report. But I understand our meeting is it this week, that new one, the 11th of November? Am I right on that? I seem to have it in my diary.
Chairman, the scrutiny review, did you say?
I'm talking about the planning review because I seem to have it in my diary that I've been notified that the second meeting of the planning committee to discuss the planning review was this week, or have I got that completely wrong?
I'll have to double check, Chairman. There's nothing in my diary, but that doesn't mean that's correct. So I'll double check. That's
fine. But I think it is. I do appreciate that these two will have slightly different timetables, and actually, I'm guessing the only real deadline we've got is full council next May. So we've still got 6 months to really make sure both the planning review and the scrutiny review are reflected properly in the final document that gets sent to full council in May. Alan?
Yeah, just really to kind of sum up what I think has been said. I think Councillor Baxter's right. If we're looking to make this in a sensible order, once we've got that, people may notice what's wrong with it, because at the moment it's really difficult to see because of the way it's written. So let's get it in a nice, sensible format, and then the issues with it will probably come out over a period. In terms of review, I would suggest that at the very least, we should be presenting a report to annual council every year that says what changes or what issues have come up that year, even if those things are just changes in roles and responsibilities. I think that we should at the very least look at the things that have gone well, look at the things that have gone badly, and making amendments to make things or more things go well on an annual basis at a minimum. There will be things we'll want to put through more quickly, getting the standards, the code of conduct in place, and also, anything else that comes to get us where there are things we didn't know we needed delegations on because they didn't exist a year ago. But I think at least annual council, we should be looking at the Constitution, Chairman, just to keep it live and to make sure that it's fit for purpose for us as an ongoing document.
Yes, thanks, Alan. I certainly think I would like one of our recommendations to be the full council that this committee does review the Constitution on an annual basis. But in terms of, as Alan said, the members' code of conduct, any issues around and around about that, perhaps the committee would need to sort of address those as and when they occurred during the course of the year. I mean, they can form part of the annual report that we make to full council, but it would be we addressed this issue last October at our meeting, whatever, and then, excuse me, and then the recommendation was passed by full council in November as an example. But we can certainly include that as part of our annual, almost a cover, an annual report indicating, there's areas that we've done, we've sorted, and those items we recommend the full council adopt. So, Councillor Baxter, I hope that's answered your questions. Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Okay, I've got one, just one. Obviously, I mean, I've seen these documents, and Councillor Linda Woodson has as well. When do you think you'd be in a position to share them initially with members of this committee? Or would you be willing to let them see these work in progress documents? Thank you.
There's just one element I'm waiting for, which is quite a big part of the building control section. So that hopefully should be with me this week. So as soon as that's embedded and mapped properly, I'm quite happy to share the working papers with members of the committee. Just again, gives the committee the opportunity to review those, and if they want a meeting with me and yourself, Chairman, to go through those, for any points of clarity or anything, then that would be helpful. So I'm happy to do that, Chairman.
And one final question, presumably when we then roll this out to all members of the council, I'm kind of thinking we may, because in effect, we've had a bit of an informal training session this morning with you. It's how it works. I mean, if we were to send all these documents over to members without any background, they may go, what on earth is this? I'm just wondering if as part of the meetings with all members, whatever, that we can kind of make those documents available in their final form, and then an explanation as to what it actually all means. Thanks. Right, I can't see anybody else wanting to raise anything around this. So I'm guessing this is going to form a report paper to the next council, isn't it, Graham? That we're going to give an update report to full council at the end of November, are we?
I wasn't proposing to, Chairman, no.
Okay.
Just for this committee to ensure that
Okay,
it's content with progress.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so maybe I'm reading the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay, so one recommendation is just really for noting is that the Constitution Committee notes progress made with the review of the Council's Constitution and agrees to propose next steps. I think we've probably done that. So I think it's just for noting. So I don't think there's any need for a formal vote, but it'd be great if I could just have a general nod of heads from members of the committee if they're fairly happy with what's been happening so far, and I'm picking that up. So thanks very much indeed, Graham, for that. Thank you. Right, okay, on to the final item on the agenda, which is any other business. And of course, this point, I was going to raise the issue of the scrutiny review and how that fits in, which I think we've covered. So I've got no more any other business items. I don't know if anybody else on the committee has got anything else. I'm quite prepared as chairman to allow any other committee member if they've got anything burning to raise with me and the rest of the members. See nobody there. Okay, right. So I think that concludes the meeting at 11:45. Thank you, everybody, for attending this morning and for your valued contributions. And I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, which I believe, Graham, is December is it the 11th of December? 6th. Which on the 6th of December. Okay, so I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.